Admiral Kethra had served the Valorian Empire for 60 years. She had commanded fleets in 12 campaigns. She had watched stars die and worlds burn. Nothing surprised her anymore. Until today. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Divine Wrath, staring at a sensor reading that made no sense. Her second officer, a young male named Torvin, kept checking the instruments like something was broken. "Run the diagnostic again," Kethra ordered. "I've run it for times, Admiral. The sensors are working perfectly." Kethra's eyes narrowed. The Valorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their sensor networks covered 1,000,000 systems. Every ship, every fleet, every civilization was tracked and recorded. Nothing moved in this galaxy without the Empire knowing about it. But according to her screens, 300 ships had just appeared from nowhere. The location made it worse. The void expanse was a dead region of space. No stars, no planets, no resources. Nothing could live there. Nothing could hide there. Every Imperial probe sent into that darkness had found exactly what the name suggested: void. Now ships were coming out of it. Configuration? She asked. "Unknown, Admiral. The computer can't match them to any design in our records." "Speed?" Torvin hesitated. "That's the other problem. They're moving at speeds that our physics says shouldn't be possible. At their current rate, they'll reach the core worlds in less than 2 weeks. Kethra felt something she hadn't felt in decades. A cold sensation running down her spine. The Valorians were the masters of this galaxy. They had crushed every rival. Their technology was the most advanced. Their fleets were the largest. No one could match them. She activated her personal communicator. "This is Admiral Kethra. I am declaring a Code Violet alert. Get me high command." Now, the response came faster than she expected. Within minutes, the faces of 7 high admirals appeared on her screen. Behind them, she could see the golden halls of the Imperial Command Center on the Homeworld report, said Grand Admiral Vestros. He was old, even by Valorian standards. His scales had turned gray with age. Kethra transmitted her sensor data. She watched the faces of the high admirals change as they processed what they were seeing. "This is impossible," one of them said. "I agree," Kethra replied. "But the readings are accurate. I've verified them personally. Have you attempted contact?" "Yes." No response. They're not answering any standard hailing frequencies. They're not broadcasting any identification. They're just moving. Fast. Grand Admiral Vestros leaned forward. "Send a probe. Get visual confirmation. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Kethra ordered the probe launched. It was one of their fastest models, capable of crossing vast distances in hours. She watched the small dot on her screen as it raced toward the unknown fleet. The wait was agonizing. The bridge was silent. Every officer watched their screens like they were waiting for a death sentence. The probe reached transmission range. Data started flowing back. Kethra had seen many ships in her long career. Valorian battlecruisers with their elegant curves, Kethran destroyers with their brutal angles, Morvish traders with their spherical hulls. She knew every design in the galaxy. She didn't know these. The ships were black. Not painted black, they seemed to absorb light itself. Their hulls were angular, covered in geometric patterns that hurt her eyes to look at. Strange symbols marked their surfaces, writing in a language no Imperial database recognized. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. "What are those markings?" Torvin whispered. Before anyone could answer, the probe's signal cut out. One moment it was transmitting. The next moment it was gone. Did they destroy it? Kethra asked. Her sensor officer shook his head slowly. "I don't think so, Admiral. I think they just turned it off, remotely, through our encryption." Silence fell over the bridge again. Valorian encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. It would take 1,000 years to crack their codes with conventional computing. Someone had done it in seconds. Kethra straightened her spine. "Get me the High Council. This is beyond military jurisdiction now. The Emperor needs to know, within hours." The news had spread through the highest levels of Imperial government. The High Council of the Valorian Empire gathered in their ancient chamber, surrounded by statues of conquering heroes and maps of subjugated worlds. The Emperor himself attended via hologram. He was young for a ruler, only 300 years old, but his eyes held the cold calculation of his bloodline. 300 ships, he said. Unidentified, unrecorded, coming from a region where nothing can exist, moving faster than anything we've ever seen. Is this correct? Yes, Divine One, said the Minister of Intelligence. We have searched every database. We have checked every historical archive. We have queried every intelligence network we maintain. There is no record of these ships. There is no record of this technology. There is no record of anyone living in the void expanse. Then where did they come from? No one had an answer. What is their heading? The Emperor asked. They are moving toward the core worlds. Divine One, if they maintain their current course and speed, they will reach Imperial Prime in 12 days. The Emperor's hologram flickered as he processed this. You're telling me that an unknown fleet will reach our homeworld in less than 2 weeks, and we know nothing about them? We are mobilizing our border fleets, said Grand Admiral Vestros. We have ordered all defensive stations to high alert. We will intercept them before they reach the inner systems. See that you do. The Emperor's image faded. The council members looked at each other. Fear was not an emotion, they were used to feeling. The Valorian Empire had not faced a real threat in 8,000 years. They had grown comfortable in their dominance. Now something was coming. Something unknown. In the back of the chamber, an old historian named Voroth watched the proceedings with growing dread. He had spent his life studying the ancient records, the histories from before the Empire's rise. Most scholars considered his work useless. Who cared about the past when the present was so glorious? But Voroth had found things in those old records. Strange things. Warnings written by Valorians who lived long before the Empire existed. Warnings about a species that came from a small world near the void expanse. A species that seemed primitive, weak, insignificant. A species called humans. The ancient records said they had been destroyed, wiped out, their world poisoned, their colonies burned. The ancestors of the Empire had considered them vermin to be exterminated. But there were other records, hidden ones, notes from survivors who had witnessed what happened when the humans fought back. One phrase kept appearing in those old documents, a phrase that had haunted Voroth for decades. Let them sleep. Never wake them. Voroth gathered his research and requested an audience with the council. They would probably ignore him. They always did. But he had to try, because if he was right, those ships weren't unknown at all. They were 8,000 years late. Meanwhile, at the edge of Imperial space, Admiral Kethra watched the unknown fleet grow larger on her sensors. They hadn't changed course. They hadn't slowed down. They were coming like a force of nature, unstoppable and inevitable. She ordered her ships into defensive formation. 50 vessels, the pride of the border fleet. Enough firepower to crack a planet. She hoped it would be enough. The first border station stood in the path of the unknown fleet. Station Kethros 7, home to 3,000 personnel and armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The unknown fleet didn't slow down. They didn't change course. They didn't fire a single weapon. They just passed by. The shockwave of their passage tore the station apart. The energy from their engines was enough to rip metal and vaporize flesh. 3,000 Valorians died in seconds, killed by the backwash of ships that hadn't even considered them worth destroying. Kethra received the report in stunned silence. They didn't even shoot, Torvin said, his voice shaking. They just flew past. Kethra understood what this meant. The unknown fleet hadn't attacked the station. They had simply ignored it. The destruction was accidental, a byproduct of their movement. To them, a fully armed Imperial station was not worth noticing. She activated her communicator again. High Command, this is Admiral Kethra. We have a Code Black situation. Repeat, Code Black. Border Station Kethros 7 has been destroyed by incidental contact with the unknown fleet. They are not attacking. They are simply too powerful for us to survive their presence. The response was immediate. Admiral, you are ordered to intercept and delay. Reinforcements are being sent. Understood. Kethra closed the channel. She looked at her bridge crew. 50 years of veterans and fresh recruits, all of them looking at her for guidance. For hope. She had none to give. Set intercept course, she ordered. Prepare all weapons. May the ancestors watch over us. The divine wrath turned toward the oncoming storm. 12 days. That's how long the Empire had to prepare for something they couldn't identify, couldn't understand. and couldn't stop. 12 days until the unknown fleet reached their homeworld. 12 days until the galaxy changed forever. The High Council chamber had become a place of fear. For the first time in millennia, the rulers of the Valorian Empire didn't know what to do. Reports kept coming in. More border stations destroyed. More ships swept aside like dust. The unknown fleet wasn't fighting them. It was simply moving through them, and anything in its path ceased to exist. Minister Kethros slammed his fist on the ancient table. We need answers. Who are they? Where did they come from? What do they want? No one could tell him. In the corner of the chamber, the old historian Voroth cleared his throat. He had been waiting for hours, clutching a data pad filled with research that everyone had ignored for decades. Now, with the Empire facing its greatest crisis, someone might finally listen. I may have information, he said quietly, every head turned toward him. Minister Kethros looked at the frail old scholar with obvious disgust. What could a dusty historian know about military matters? Nothing about military matters, Voroth admitted. But I know about history, and I believe I know who is coming. The Emperor's hologram flickered into existence. His young face was tight with tension. Speak, historian. We are running out of time. Voroth walked to the center of the chamber, his old bones aching. He activated his data pad and projected images onto the main screen. They were ancient images, corrupted by time, showing primitive spacecraft and a small blue world. 8,000 years ago, he began. Before the Empire existed, our ancestors explored a region of space near what we now call the void expanse. They found a small planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet was dangerous. High gravity, extreme weather, filled with predators and diseases. He changed the image. Now the screen showed creatures. They stood on two legs, with soft skin and small eyes. They looked weak, fragile. They found a species living there. They called themselves humans. Several council members laughed. Humans are a myth, said Minister Kethros. A story told to frighten children. That is what we were meant to believe, Voroth said. But I have found the original records, the unedited ones. Our ancestors didn't just find the humans. They studied them. They tested them. He brought up more images. Charts and graphs, scientific reports from a civilization that no longer existed. The humans were primitive compared to our ancestors. They had only recently discovered space travel. Their weapons were crude. Their ships were slow. Our ancestors saw them as curiosities at first, then as pests, then as threats. The Emperor leaned forward. How could such primitive creatures be a threat? Voroth took a deep breath. The humans came from a death world. Their planet tried to kill them every day of their lives. They evolved to survive. They were stronger than they looked. They healed faster than any species we had ever encountered. They could survive injuries that would kill a Valorian instantly. He paused. But that wasn't what frightened our ancestors. It was their minds. Humans could adapt to anything. They could learn at incredible speeds. They could work together in ways that seemed impossible. And they had a capacity for violence that made our ancestors look like peaceful grazers. The chamber was silent now. No one was laughing. Our ancestors decided the humans were too dangerous to exist. They launched an extermination campaign. They poisoned the human homeworld with biological weapons. They hunted down their colonies one by one. They burned their cities and killed their children. Voroth's voice grew heavy. They thought they succeeded. The human population dropped to near zero. Their world became uninhabitable. Our ancestors marked them as extinct and moved on. Then who is in those ships? The Emperor demanded. I believe they are the survivors. Voroth changed the image again. Now the screen showed fragments of text written in a language the translators struggled to process. I found these records buried in a military archive that was supposed to have been destroyed. They were written by officers who participated in the extermination campaign. He read from the text. Day 47. We thought we had killed them all. We were wrong. A fleet appeared from nowhere. Ships we had never seen before. They didn't match any design we had on record. They moved too fast. Their weapons were too powerful. We lost 18 vessels in the first minute of engagement. The council members exchanged worried glances. Day 52. They're not fighting like desperate survivors. They're fighting like they've been preparing for this for years. Our intelligence was wrong. They weren't primitive. They were hiding. They let us think we were stronger. They let us get close. Voroth scrolled to another entry. Day 71. Command has ordered a full retreat. We can't win this. The human ships are everywhere and nowhere. They strike without warning and vanish before we can respond. Our losses are catastrophic. The only reason any of us survived is because they let us go. He looked up at the council. The final entry reads, they could have killed us all. They chose not to. I don't know why. But I know this: we made a terrible mistake. We poked a sleeping predator. We need to make sure no one ever does this again. Let them sleep. Never wake them. The silence that followed was absolute. You're saying, the Emperor said slowly, that these ships belong to a species we tried to exterminate 8,000 years ago? A species that defeated our ancestors and then simply disappeared? Yes, Divine One. I believe the humans fled into the void expanse, a region where we would never think to look. They have been there ever since, waiting. Minister Kethros shook his head. This is absurd. Even if some humans survived, they couldn't have maintained a technological civilization for 8,000 years in dead space. It's not possible. Our ancestors thought it wasn't possible for humans to survive their own planet. Voroth replied. They were wrong about that too. The Emperor's hologram flickered with agitation. What do they want? Why are they coming now? Voroth hesitated. This was the part he feared most. I found one more document, a transcript of a communication between human survivors and our ancestors. Just before the humans disappeared into the void, he displayed the text on the screen. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. We will remember what you did to our children. We will remember what you did to our world. We will not forget, and we will not forgive. But we are not like you. We do not commit genocide for convenience. So we will leave. We will go where you cannot find us. And we will wait. We will watch. If your descendants become better than you, if they learn to live in peace with others, we will remain in the darkness forever. But if they become worse, if they spread your cruelty across the galaxy, we will return. And there will be a reckoning. The Emperor's face had gone pale. They've been watching us for 8,000 years, Divine One, watching to see if we would change. And we conquered the galaxy, whispered one of the ministers. We enslaved 17 species. We built an empire on the suffering of billions. Voroth nodded slowly. We showed them exactly what we are. And now they're coming. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for total war. The Emperor's hologram flickered as he tried to restore order. In the midst of the chaos, a communication officer rushed into the chamber. His face was white with terror. Divine One, Admiral Ketha has engaged the unknown fleet. Every voice fell silent, and the Emperor demanded. The officer's hands shook as he read from his data pad. 50 of our warships opened fire with everything they had. The enemy vessels didn't even attempt to evade. Our weapons hit them directly. All of them. The result: no damage, Divine One, no damage at all. The enemy then moved. The engagement lasted 11 seconds. All 50 ships were destroyed. The Admiral's flagship was left intact. They sent a message through her communications array. The officer looked like he might collapse. They said, "Tell your masters we're coming. They have one chance to surrender." The council chamber fell into silence again. This time, no one broke it. Voroth gathered his data pad and walked toward the door. He had done what he could. Now the decision rested with those in power. Behind him, he heard the Emperor's voice, thin and frightened. "What have we done?" Voroth didn't answer. He already knew. They had done exactly what their ancestors had done 8,000 years ago. They had underestimated humanity, and now humanity was coming to collect the debt. Across the Empire, the news spread. Rumors at first, then confirmed reports. An ancient species, believed extinct, had returned. They were more powerful than anything the Empire had ever faced. They were coming for the homeworld. And they remembered everything on 17 subjugated worlds. Slaves looked up at the sky and wondered if salvation was finally at hand. They had heard stories, passed down through generations, of a species that fought against tyranny, a species that never forgot the suffering of the innocent. The humans were coming. For some, it was a threat. For others, it was a promise. Admiral Kethra stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, watching the impossible become real. The divine wrath drifted alone in the debris field that had once been the pride of the border fleet. 50 warships, each capable of destroying a small moon, had been reduced to scattered atoms in 11 seconds. Only her ship survived, and only because the enemy had chosen to spare it. Her crew worked in stunned silence. Some were treating injuries. Others were trying to restore damaged systems. All of them wore the same expression of disbelief, Admiral. Her communications officer said quietly, "We're receiving another transmission from the enemy fleet." Kethra straightened her spine. She was terrified, but she was still an admiral of the Valorian Empire. She would not show fear. "Put it through." The main screen flickered. A face appeared. A human face. Kethra had studied the ancient records that Vorath had distributed to military commanders. She had seen images of what humans supposedly looked like, but seeing one in motion, alive and watching her with intelligent eyes, was something different entirely. The human was female, as far as Kethra could tell. Her skin was a warm brown color, darker than the pale specimens in the old records. Her hair was black, cut short, and streaked with gray. Her eyes were dark and steady. She wore a uniform of some kind, black with silver markings. On her collar was a symbol that Kethra didn't recognize, but somehow understood was a mark of high rank. Admiral Kethra of the Valorian Empire, the human said. The translator took a moment to process the words, then rendered them in perfect imperial standard. "My name is Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Confederation Remnant Fleet. I believe we need to talk." Kethra forced her voice to remain steady. "You have destroyed 50 of my ships and killed thousands of my crew. What is there to talk about?" "The future," Chen Wei replied. "Your future. Your empire's future. Whether either will exist in 2 weeks. Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact." The human's expression didn't change. 8,000 years ago, your ancestors tried to exterminate my species. They poisoned our world. They murdered our children. They hunted us across the stars like animals." Kethra felt a chill run through her. "I know the history, but that was 8,000 years ago. We had nothing to do with those crimes." "No, you didn't." Chen Wei nodded slowly. "And for a while, we thought that might matter. We hoped your descendants would be different. We watched from the darkness, waiting to see what kind of civilization you would build." Her eyes hardened. "You built an empire on slavery. You conquered species that had never threatened you. You erased cultures and exterminated populations. You took the cruelty of your ancestors and spread it across the entire galaxy. We brought order," Kethra said, though the words sounded hollow even to her. "We brought stability. You brought chains." Chen Wei's voice was cold. "We've watched you for 8,000 years, Admiral. We've seen everything. The labor camps, the execution grounds, the breeding programs, the children torn from their families, the elderly worked to death, the sick left to die." She leaned forward. "We've seen what your empire truly is, and we've decided that it ends now." Kethra felt anger rising in her chest. "You can't judge us. You're not gods. No, we're not gods. We're survivors. We know what it's like to face extinction. We know the desperation, the fear, the rage. We could have become like you. We could have let our suffering turn us into monsters." Chen Wei's expression shifted. For a moment, Kethra saw something like sadness in those alien eyes. "We chose a different path. We rebuilt our civilization in the darkness. We developed technology beyond anything your empire can imagine. We could have come back at any time and burned your worlds to ash. Why didn't you? Because revenge isn't justice. Because punishing the innocent for the crimes of their ancestors makes us no better than those ancestors. Because we wanted to believe that your species could change." The human admiral was quiet for a moment. "We were wrong. You didn't change. You got worse." Kethra thought about the empire she had served her entire life, the conquests she had participated in, the species she had helped subjugate. She had told herself it was for the greater good, that the empire brought civilization to primitive worlds, but she had also seen the slave markets. She had heard the screaming in the labor camps. She had watched children branded with ownership marks. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "Unconditional surrender. All slaves freed. All conquered species granted independence. Your military leaders will face trial for crimes against sentient life. Your government will be restructured under supervision. The emperor will never accept those terms. Then the emperor will watch his empire fall. Chen Wei's voice was matter of fact. We have 300 ships. Your entire combined fleet can't scratch our paint. We will reach your home world in 10 days, and when we arrive, we will not be asking nicely. Kethra searched for words. If you're so powerful, why bother talking to me at all? Why not just destroy everything and be done with it? Because we're not monsters. Because we don't want to kill billions of Valorians who never made these decisions. Because your species has potential, even if your leaders have wasted it. Chen Wei's expression softened slightly. And because I know what it's like to be a soldier following orders. I know the difference between those who give commands and those who carry them out. Your crews didn't deserve to die today. I wish there had been another way. Kethra felt something crack inside her. This human, this enemy, was showing more compassion than any Valorian commander she had ever served under. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to deliver a message to your emperor. Tell him what I've told you. Tell him that surrender is the only option that doesn't end in annihilation. Tell him that we will accept nothing less than complete and immediate compliance. He won't listen. Then make him listen. Find others who understand what's coming. Build support for surrender. Do whatever you have to do. Chen Wei paused. Because if your emperor forces us to fight, we will win. And the cost in Valorian lives will be beyond anything your species has ever experienced. Kethra nodded slowly. I will deliver your message. Good. Chen Wei started to turn away, then stopped. Admiral, for what it's worth, you fought bravely today. Your tactics were sound. Your crew performed well. Against any other enemy, you might have won. But not against you. No, not against us. Not anymore. The screen went dark. Kethra stood alone on her bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she had believed in. The empire she had served was built on lies and cruelty. The humans she had been told were extinct were more powerful than anything she could imagine. And she had 10 days to convince an emperor to surrender. She activated her personal communicator. Navigation, set course for the home world. Maximum speed. Admiral, our engines are damaged. We can only make half speed. Then make half speed. We don't have time to wait for repairs, as the divine wrath limped toward home. Kethra began composing her message. She would tell the truth, all of it. She would describe the power of the human ships, the precision of their weapons, the mercy they had shown in sparing her crew. Whether anyone would listen was another matter entirely. Behind her, through the viewport, she could see the Terran fleet resuming its advance. 300 ships moving in perfect formation, carrying 8,000 years of patient anger toward the heart of the galaxy. They were not rushing. They didn't need to. They had already won. The only question now was how much the Empire would lose before it accepted the truth. In slave quarters across 17 worlds, the news spread through whispered rumors and stolen communications. The humans were real. They had returned. They were coming to free the enslaved Dot from millions who had known nothing but chains. Hope began to bloom for the masters who had held those chains. A new emotion emerged. Fear. The galaxy was about to change, whether the Valorian Empire liked it or not. The Emperor received Admiral Kethra's message in his private chambers. He listened to her report 3 times, his young face growing darker with each repetition. Then he destroyed the communication terminal with his bare hands. Surrender, he spat. A Valorian emperor does not surrender. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We will not bow to a handful of primitives who got lucky. His advisors stood in terrified silence. No one dared to contradict him. Mobilize everything, the Emperor commanded. Every ship, every station, every weapon we possess. If these humans want a war, we will give them a war they will never forget. Within hours, the largest military mobilization in Imperial history began. 10,000 warships gathered from every corner of the Empire. Planetary defense grids were activated on 100 worlds. Ancient superweapons, some unused for millennia, were brought online. The Imperial propaganda machine roared to life. Citizens were told that a minor threat had emerged and would be crushed within days. The word human was forbidden in official communications. They were referred to only as the invaders or the terrorist fleet, but rumors spread anyway. Stories leaked from survivors of the border fleet, tales of ships that couldn't be damaged, weapons that couldn't be stopped, enemies that showed mercy even in victory. The enslaved species heard these stories and began to hope. The Terran fleet continued its advance. On day 7, they reached the Kethros system. A defensive line of 2,000 Imperial warships waited for them, the largest concentration of military force the Empire had ever assembled in one location. Admiral Vestros commanded from his flagship, the Divine Judgment. He was old and experienced, a veteran of countless campaigns. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. He did not believe in fairy tales about ancient humans. All ships, he commanded, open fire on my mark. 2,000 ships unleashed their weapons at once. Plasma beams, nuclear missiles, quantum torpedoes, gravity bombs. Every weapon in the Imperial arsenal flew toward the Terran fleet. The display was spectacular. Space itself seemed to burn with the concentrated firepower of the most powerful civilization. In the galaxy. When the light faded, the Terran fleet was undamaged. Their shields hadn't even flickered. That's not possible, Vestros whispered. No shield technology could withstand that, Admiral, his sensor officer said, his voice shaking. They're moving. The Terran ships accelerated, not toward the Imperial line, but around it, through it, past it. They moved through the defensive formation like water through sand, flowing around obstacles without slowing down. As they passed each Imperial ship, something happened. A pulse of energy, invisible and silent, swept through the vessels. Weapons systems went offline. Shields collapsed. Engines died. In the slave quarters of each ship, something else happened. The explosive collars worn by the enslaved crew members deactivated. Their neural restraints shut down. For the first time in their lives, they were free. What are they doing? Vestros demanded. They're not destroying us, Admiral. They're liberating our slaves. Vestros watched in horror as his crew began to change. The slaves who had worked the lower decks for generations were standing up. They were looking at their former masters with expressions that mixed fear with something new. Something like hope. Restrain them, Vestros ordered. Get them back to their stations. But the slave collars were dead. The neural restraints were gone. And there were far more slaves on each ship than there were Valorian crew members. Across the defensive line, the same scene played out on every vessel. Ships designed to be operated by enslaved labor suddenly found that labor unwilling to cooperate. Some crews managed to maintain control. Others didn't. The Terran fleet passed through the defensive line without firing a single shot. They left behind a chaos of disabled weapons, freed slaves, and Valorian officers desperately trying to maintain order. The message was clear. The humans could have destroyed them all. They chose not to. On the home world, the Emperor received the reports with growing rage. They're freeing our property. They have no right. Divine one brave advisor said. Perhaps we should consider what? Surrender, never. Bring up the planetary shields. Activate the surface batteries. We will fight them on the ground if we must. But even as he gave orders, the news from other systems was getting worse. The humans weren't just advancing toward the home world. They were broadcasting. Every system they passed through received a transmission containing the complete history of human-Valorian relations, the original attack on Earth, the extermination campaign, the biological weapons used on human children, and then the second part of the broadcast, a complete record of every atrocity committed by the Valorian Empire over 12,000 years, the conquered species, the enslaved populations, the mass executions, the cultural erasures. The evidence was undeniable. The Empire had documented its own crimes with meticulous precision, never imagining anyone would ever hold them accountable. Now the galaxy knew the truth. On the 17 enslaved worlds, uprisings began. Slave populations that had been kept docile for generations suddenly remembered how to fight. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The humans were coming, and they were coming to set everyone free. The Imperial military found itself fighting on 1,000 fronts. Ships that should have been defending the home world were diverted to crush rebellions. Troops that should have been manning defensive positions were sent to restore order on distant planets. The Empire was tearing itself apart, Day 9. The Terran fleet was one day from the home world. The High Council met in emergency session. Half the members were absent, trapped on distant worlds or dead in the spreading chaos. Those who remained looked at each other with fear in their eyes. "We need to negotiate," said Minister Kethros. The same man who had dismissed the historian Vorath now looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to reach out to them and find terms we can accept. The Emperor will never agree." Someone said, "Then we need to make him agree. Or we need to act without him." The words hung in the air. Treason. The overthrow of the Emperor. Actions that would have been unthinkable a week ago. But a week ago, the Empire had been the undisputed master of the galaxy. Now it was a crumbling ruin, brought down not by military defeat, but by the simple act of setting slaves free. The humans had found their weakness and exploited it perfectly. The Empire was built on enslaved labor. Remove that labor, and everything collapsed. "I will speak to the Emperor," said Admiral Kethra. She had arrived at the home world just hours before, her damaged ship barely holding together. "I've seen what they can do. I've spoken to their commander. Maybe I can make him understand." She didn't believe it, but she had to try. The Emperor received her in his throne room. He sat surrounded by guards, his face a mask of fury and fear. "You failed me," he said as she approached. "Your fleet was destroyed. You let them humiliate us, Divine One. They spared my ship specifically so I could deliver their message. They want surrender, not destruction. I do not surrender. Then they will destroy us. Not our ships. They've proven they don't need to do that. They will destroy our economy, our society, our entire way of life. They're already doing it." The Emperor's hands clenched on the arms of his throne. "We have ruled for 12,000 years. We will not fall to a species we exterminated millennia ago. We didn't exterminate them. We failed. And now they're more powerful than we ever imagined." Kethra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Divine One, I have served the Empire my entire life. I have killed for it, bled for it, watched friends die for it. But the Empire I served was built on a lie. We told ourselves we brought order and civilization. We brought slavery and death. You dare, I dare because someone has to." Kethra's voice rose. "Look at what's happening. Our slaves are rising up. Our ships are crippled. Our economy is collapsing. The humans didn't need to fire a single shot at the homeworld to bring us down. They just showed the galaxy what we really are." She pointed toward the window, where the sky was darkening with smoke from riots in the lower districts. "Your empire is already fallen, Divine One. The only question is whether you fall with it." The Emperor stared at her. For a moment, she thought she saw something behind the rage, fear, desperation, maybe even understanding. Then his face hardened. "Guards, execute this traitor." The guards moved forward. Kethra closed her eyes. She had tried. That was all anyone could do. Then the doors burst open, and Minister Kethros rushed in, followed by a dozen council members. "Divine One, the Terran fleet has arrived. They're in orbit." Every head turned toward the windows. Through the gathering smoke, they could see lights in the sky. Not stars, ships. 300 vessels, hanging motionless above the capital city. The Emperor's face went white. "Fire the orbital batteries. Fire everything." "We can't, Divine One. Our weapons systems are offline. Something's blocking them. Then get them online." A voice interrupted. It came from every speaker in the room, from every communication device, from the air itself. "Emperor Kethros the 43rd, said Admiral Chenwei. "Your empire's defenses are under our control. Your military forces across the galaxy are in disarray. Your enslaved populations are in open rebellion. You have lost." The Emperor stood, his hands shaking. "You will not dictate terms to me." "I'm not dictating terms. I'm offering you a choice." Chenwei's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Surrender our past in silence." Emperor Kethros sat on his throne, unmoving, while his remaining advisors whispered urgently around him. Outside, the sounds of chaos had grown louder. Fires burned in the lower city. Slaves who had served in households for generations were walking away, following the lights in the sky. When the hour ended, Admiral Chenwei's voice returned. "Emperor, your answer." Kethros stood slowly. His ceremonial robes seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. His crown felt like a chain around his neck, "I offer my life," he said. "My life for my people. Execute me and spare them." There was a long pause. "That's not how this works," Chen Wei replied. "Your life doesn't pay for 8,000 years of slavery. Your death doesn't free a single person still in chains. We're not interested in martyrs or symbols. We want justice. What justice can there be for crimes so old? The same justice there always is. Truth, accountability, change." A hologram flickered to life in the throne room. Chen Wei appeared, standing as if she were really there. She was older than Kethra had expected. Deep lines marked her face, and her hair was more gray than black. But her eyes were sharp and clear. 8,000 years ago, she said, "Your ancestors destroyed my world. They poisoned our oceans, burned our forests, and murdered our children. They hunted us across the stars like vermin." She walked slowly toward the Emperor. "We could have done the same to you. We've had the capability for centuries. One order from me, and your homeworld becomes a dead rock. Your species becomes a memory." Kethros said nothing. "But we're not your ancestors. We don't murder children. We don't exterminate species. We survived the worst thing any civilization can survive. And we chose to be better than those who hurt us." Chen Wei stopped a few feet from the throne. "So here's what's going to happen. Your military leaders will surrender their forces. Your government officials will submit to investigation. Every slave in your empire will be freed, immediately and unconditionally. Every conquered species will be offered independence. And then the people you enslaved will decide what happens to you." The Emperor's eyes widened. "You would let them judge us? They have more right than anyone. They've suffered under your rule for thousands of years. They know exactly what your empire has done." Chen Wei's expression softened slightly. "This isn't about revenge, Emperor. It's about giving the victims a voice. They've never had one before. They'll demand our extinction. Maybe, or maybe they'll surprise you. People who have suffered often have more compassion than those who haven't." Chen Wei turned to face the gathered ministers and guards. "The choice is yours. Accept these terms and face the judgment of those you've wronged. Refuse and face us." The throne room was silent. Every Valorian present knew what the choice really meant. Accept uncertainty, or accept certain destruction. Minister Kethros stepped forward. "I accept the terms. On behalf of the council, I accept. You don't speak for me." The Emperor shouted, "No, Divine One. I don't." Kethros turned to face his ruler. "But I speak for every Valorian who doesn't want to die for your pride. I speak for every family who wants to see tomorrow. I speak for every child who deserves a future." Other ministers stepped forward. Then guards. Then servants, one by one. The Emperor found himself standing alone. "This is treason," he whispered. "No," said Admiral Kethra, who had watched everything in silence. "This is survival. Something humans apparently know quite a lot about." The Emperor's shoulders slumped. The fire went out of his eyes. For the first time in 12,000 years, a Valorian emperor had been defeated. "Fine," he said quietly. "I surrender." Chen Wei nodded. A wise choice. The Terran fleet descended. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. Every slave collar was deactivated. Every neural restraint was shut down. Billions of beings who had known nothing but servitude woke up free. It wasn't easy. Freedom never is. Many didn't know how to live without masters. Many feared what would happen next. Some turned to violence, lashing out at their former owners. But the humans were there, helping to manage the transition. They had experience with liberation, they said. Their ancestors had fought their own wars against slavery, long before they reached the stars. They knew the challenges and the pitfalls. Slowly, painfully, a new order began to emerge. The conquered species held councils to decide their futures. Some chose independence immediately, eager to rebuild their own civilizations. Others chose to remain in loose confederation with their neighbors, recognizing that cooperation brought strength. And they debated what to do with the Valorians. The discussions took 3 months. Representatives from 17 species, many of whom had never been allowed to speak before, gathered to discuss the fate of their former masters. Some called for execution. Others demanded exile. A few wanted the Valorians to suffer as they had suffered, to know the pain of slavery firsthand. But in the end, the majority chose something else. imprisonment for the leaders, rehabilitation for the soldiers and administrators, education for the general population. The Valorians would not be destroyed. They would be taught, "We will not become what we hate," said the representative of the Morvish species, whose people had been enslaved for 6,000 years. If we kill them for killing, if we enslave them for enslaving, we prove that they were right about how the galaxy works. We prove that strength only matters when it causes pain. The representative paused. "We have seen enough death. We have known enough suffering. Let it end here." The vote was close, but it passed. The Valorians would live. Admiral Chen Wei attended the final session. When the vote was announced, she stood and addressed the gathered representatives. 8,000 years ago, my ancestors fled into the darkness to escape extinction. We could have stayed there forever. We could have let this galaxy tear itself apart while we watched from safety. Instead, we chose to return because we made a promise. She looked around the chamber at the faces of species she had studied for centuries, but was meeting. For the first time, we promised the victims of tyranny that if we survived, we would come back for them. We promised that no one would be forgotten. We promised that one day, the chains would break. Her voice grew thick with emotion. Today, that promise is kept. You are free. What you do with that freedom is up to you. We can't make your choices for you. We won't stay and rule in the Empire's place. This is your galaxy now. Will you leave? Someone asked, eventually. We came to set you free, not to conquer. Our home is in the void expanse now. We've built something beautiful there, something your ancestors could never destroy. Chen Wei smiled, and for a moment she looked like someone's grandmother, rather than the commander of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. But we'll be watching, not to judge, not to control, just to remember, because that's what we do. We remember. The Terran fleet departed 3 weeks later, 300 ships, rising from orbit and turning toward the darkness between the stars. They left behind a changed galaxy, a galaxy where 17 species were learning to govern themselves, a galaxy where the word slave was becoming obsolete, a galaxy where the mighty had been humbled and the humble had been lifted up. On the edge of the void expanse, a beacon began to broadcast. Its message went out in every known language, repeating endlessly, "This is the Terran Confederation. We are humanity. We remember what was done to us, and we remember what was done to others. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek revenge. We seek only justice and the freedom of all sentient beings. If you are suffering, know that you are not forgotten. If you are enslaved, know that chains can be broken. If you are alone, know that someone is watching over you. We were nearly destroyed. We survived. We grew stronger. And we chose to use that strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Choose carefully how you treat the powerless, because one day they might not be." The beacon would broadcast for centuries, a reminder to every civilization in the galaxy. Humanity remembered. Humanity watched. And humanity would return if they were needed again. Far away, on what had once been the Valorian homeworld, a young child of a former slave species looked up at the stars. She had been born in chains. She would grow up free. "Mother," she asked, "who were the humans?" Her mother smiled and pointed toward the darkness. "They were the ones who kept their promise. The ones who came back. Will they ever come back again? I hope not, because if they come back, it means someone needs saving. And I hope, little one, that we learn to save ourselves." The child nodded, though she didn't quite understand, but she would remember the story. And she would tell her children, who would tell their children, the story of the species that rose from ashes, the species that chose mercy over vengeance, the species that waited 8,000 years to keep a promise, the story of humanity. In the darkness between the stars, Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the galaxy recede into the distance. "It's done," her first officer said. For now, Chen Wei turned away from the viewport. "There will be other empires, other tyrants, other slaves who need freeing, and we'll return." Chen Wei thought about her ancestors, who had fled a dying Earth with nothing but determination and hope. She thought about the generations who had built a civilization in TH.